Throughout the 17th to 19th centuries, Suriname was home to several types of plantations. Due to the circumstances and different types of produce that only grew in certain environments, plantations were strategically located to facilitate growth of a specific product. For example, sugar and coffee plantations could not withstand the saltiness of the ocean waters, and therefore, cotton plantations were predominantly concentrated at a coastal area near the ocean. Cotton was one of the few shrubs that were able to grow in these soils. Initially, the planters established only sugarcane plantations, while coffee and cotton were introduced much later. By 1795, there were around 39 cotton plantations in Suriname. Around 1820, sugar, coffee, and cotton were the three most important crops on plantations, while cocoa was not as demanded. By 1825, cotton plantations almost doubled, reaching its peak, slowly declining afterwards, and completely disappeared from the market by 1890. Around 1790, the lands that laid close to the sea between the Warapa and Vredenburg Creek were cleared for the soon-to-be cotton plantations. Alex van Stiprian, a prominent historian, mentions in his book Suriname Contrast that there were no cotton plantations before 1770. However, according to the accounts by Maarten Douwes Teenstra, agronomist, traveler and writer, and Jan Jacob Hartzink, Dutch historian, small-scale cultivation already existed. Teenstra mentioned that Plantation Felix on the Mantapika Creek was the first to set up a 500-acre plantation with cotton by 1735. Hartzink confirms that this was an experiment by the owner of Plantation Felix, who planted cotton shrubs between his coffee crops. The general thought at that time was that the Biri-Biri lands were useless and that even cotton would not properly grow there. The Biri-Biri lands are lands in the coastal areas of Suriname which are low, swampy, and mainly with brushes. The exact opposite was proven when the owner of Plantation Felix exported 3 to 4,000 pounds of cotton reaped from his own plantation. In the following years, this amount kept on increasing. The neighboring plantations mimicked this way of planting cotton, and it slowly grew into a separate industry where plantations erected that solely focused on planting cotton shrubs. One of Suriname's last cotton plantation was called Plantation Esthersrust. Plantation Esthersrust was a cotton plantation on the confluence of the Warapa Canal and the Atlantic Ocean. The Warapa Canal was a man-dug extension of the existing Warapa Creek. Egbert Jacobus Bartelink, a Surinamese mulatto, describes the Warapa Creek area as to have been the most beautiful and rich agricultural region in its time. It was even called the Kleine Stad, or Little City. He further described the well-maintained paths along the banks of the creek, mentioning the masterly waterlogs that gave a considerable appearance to the plantations. He further mentioned stone bridges, large beautiful houses, and other buildings that were all present. Plantation Esthersrust, although at the end of the Warapa Canal, was also part of this little city. This cotton plantation is briefly mentioned in various colonial accounts and is also found on different colonial maps. The history of Plantation Esthersrust started with Jan Limas. In 1786, Jan Limas received a piece of land and named it Aan Barbados. Later, it was named Esthersrust, and by 1825, it was changed to Esthersrust. By 1819, the Flemish family Schas were the new owners of Plantation Esthersrust. They settled in Suriname, Netherlands, India, Indonesia, and North America. They were also the owners of Plantation Barbados, Goudmijn, and Ostasio. In local parlance, the names of these plantations were also referred to as Kasi, derived from the owner's name Schas. In 1853, the brothers Butts bought this plantation of 850 acres and appointed Jehaas and Son as administrators while they were based in Helmond, North Brabant in the Netherlands. Presently, the exact layout of Plantation Esthersrust is still unknown, but there is a short description of the different buildings and possessions found in an auction advertisement in the Surinaamse Courant dating back to the 10th October 1871. At the time of its auction in 1871, it consisted of a 200-acre piece of land planted with cotton shrubs. Furthermore, it also had a good drainage system, steam machine, cotton press, and a mill. In addition, there was a large residential house including a storage place for cotton, a stone kitchen, hospital, factory buildings, workers' houses or slave houses, vessels opened and closed, a 10-boat, and 50 horned cattle. In other accounts, there are mentions of additional buildings on the plantation, such as a church named the Peter Klaverkapel and a school.
Plantation Esthersrust presents us a wonderful opportunity as one of the first archaeologically excavated plantations in Suriname. It presents a great opportunity to explore the other side of colonialism, and that's the African side, that's the enslaved side. So, what could we possibly learn from the over 100 slaves, Africans, that were held in captivity at plantations Esthersrust? African diaspora archaeology, particularly archaeology that deals with enslaved peoples in a plantation setting, often enables us to learn about the tools of confinement. What objects and mechanisms were actually used to physically hold people in bondage, and can we see that archaeologically? Will it reveal that? Or what might we learn about burial practices of the enslaved Africans there? Were they buried with grave goods? Were they buried without grave goods? What can this tell us about their status and their own belief structures while they resided at Plantation Esthersrust? And what about biochemical or bioarchaeological studies of these individuals? We might learn about their nutritional deficiencies, their physical hardships, the level of corporal abuse that they suffered. So exploring the other side of Plantations Esthersrust provides us with an opportunity to learn about not just how the Europeans or Dutch and the variety of other persons, the variety of European people at Esthersrust lived, but it will help us understand how enslaved Africans adapted to life at Esthersrust.
One of the main things that affects any coast are the amount of sediment that is deposited or eroded. To understand this process of sedimentation and erosion in the context of Plantation Esthersrust, it is important to understand the shifting mudflats of the Guyana Shield. Coastal development in Suriname is determined by the continuously westward migrating system of mudbanks and interbank areas. Mudbanks vary in length between 30 and 60 kilometers and extend offshore to about the 20-meter isobath. These mudbanks are approximately 5 meters thick. Suriname's coastline is just one part of a larger ecosystem that stretches from the mouth of the Amazon in Brazil to the Orinoco in Venezuela. These mighty rivers play an important role in the transportation of massive mineral-rich mudbanks along the coast of the Guyanas. The abundance or scarcity of these mud deposits is subject to an ebb and flood cycle lasting circa 30 years. It is estimated that 3 times per century the coastline is subjected to mud scarcity and erosion, which allows the high tide to penetrate more inland. These periods of erosion are followed by a period of accretion as the cycle continues.
Former plantation Esthersrust is located along the coast of Suriname, which is characterized by the movement of mudbanks from east to west. When there is a mudbank in front of the coast, then there is a lot of sedimentation and that part of the coast progrades in seaward direction. In between two mudbanks, there will be a lot of erosion, which is now the case for the former plantation Esthersrust. Due to these erosion processes, a lot of the buildings which were located on the former plantation of Esthersrust are now exposed, and the thing is that in a couple of years there will be another mudbank in front of this part of the coast, and then the former plantation of Esthersrust will be protected again.
De bescherming van plantage Esthersrust is enigszins problematisch, omdat verspreid over het hele terrein vind je allerlei artefacten. En bezoekers kunnen eigenlijk anytime artefacten meenemen zonder dat er eigenlijk enige controle is. Er is niemand daar ter plekke om te controleren. Dus dat is echt problematisch. Zelfs al zou je de site beschermen op basis van de monumentenwet, blijft het moeilijk om te voorkomen dat bezoekers artefacten meenemen. Ja, nou, bezoekers moeten eigenlijk inzien dat als je iets meeneemt van plantage Esthersrust, dat je eigenlijk niet bijdraagt aan behoud van een stukje geschiedenis van plantage Esthersrust. Want als je een object meeneemt, gaat de context verloren. Het is juist belangrijk dat je object vindt binnen een bepaalde context, waardoor je eigenlijk wat over die plantage of over een bepaalde structuur kan vertellen. Haal je object weg, dan is er geen context, is de context verloren. Dus je hebt wel misschien een mooi object meegenomen, maar wat kan je er verder over zeggen? Terwijl als je binnen een wetenschappelijk kader de objecten verzamelt, de artefacten verzamelt, kan je daar een verhaal van maken.
Just as in the colonial times, Plantation Esthersrust is still only accessible by boat. Even though this plantation is remotely located, this does not stop persons from collecting artifacts intentionally. It is often reported that people are sighted with metal detectors. Except for looters, fishermen set up camp on the other side of the Warapa Canal, where they use the bricks and other artifacts to build fireplaces. This demonstrates that much has yet to be done.
The archaeological site at the mouth of the Warapa Creek is in danger. We have, of course, fishermen who come there, and when they stay there at night, they sometimes wander to look for bottles. But we also have semi-professional looters who come there to look for bottles and other artifacts and sell them in the city or keep them at their home in the city. We don't know exactly what to do about that. It was even the case that a group from Paramaribo even sold the floor of the whole cotton factory for a project in Paramaribo. And just before they took out the tiles, this was stopped by Mr. Stefan Fouquet, luckily. Otherwise, it was all gonna be destroyed. We are looking for help to get this kind of archaeological sites protected. We of Foundation Warapa Creek are extra careful about taking things out ourselves. We don't do that at all. Mainly because we are a scientific tourism project and we host a lot of researchers. And if we host researchers, they have to have permits, of course. So if we ask permits from the government to collect plants or birds or something, we don't want trouble with the government, so we don't pick anything out of the ground or etc. But it is very disturbing to see that people surrounding the area are taking everything out, and we are not, of course.
Plantation Esthersrust holds special importance to Suriname because it's an opportunity to learn about the spatial layout of cotton plantations and a space that serves as a memory of a specific period in Surinamese history. Plantation Esthersrust existed in a time when cotton production was at its prime. It is an example of a bygone era. Most of the plantations that are still known and visited by local people and tourists are mostly sugar plantations. Therefore, Plantation Esthersrust gives us a wonderful opportunity to understand Suriname's cotton past even better. Therefore, its protection and the creation of awareness on its protection is of eminent importance. Although it's a work in progress, it's certainly worth it.